Okay, macro unit 3.11. We're going to talk about our first introduction to the money markets. There are two money markets that you have to know for this class. The first one is a little easy to understand right now. The money supply, all dollar bills in society exist, and we know that number theoretically. We know exactly how many dollar bills, United States dollar bills, exist in not just the U.S. but in the world, because U.S. bills are traded in other countries. So we say that we know that exact number, so that we have a quantity of money supply that is vertical. We know this exact number, okay? And we have a demand for that money, and we call the price of that money the interest rate, but the nominal interest rate. This graph you do not have to know just yet. This is Unit 4, and we're going to talk about this all throughout Unit 4. Some of this money here, right, this is all the money in the world for the United States. Some of that is, in the United States, is considered savings, right, for the United States. And so we have this other market here. This is the one we're going to do today, called the Loanable Funds market. This one was called the money market. The general term is the money market graph. Here, this one's called the Loanable Funds, or LF. Okay, LF graph. What does that tell us? Well, we have a supply of loanable funds and a demand for loanable funds, and a quantity, right? Wherever a quantity is, quantity 1. We don't have a nominal interest rate. The important thing to know is we have what's called a real interest rate. But what does that mean? For now, all you need to know is that we've already subtracted for inflation. So if I put the $100 in the bank, if I go by the real interest rate, I make $5 real dollars. I can buy $5 more dollars worth of actual goods and services because we subtracted for inflation. All right, so that's the difference between the two. A portion of this money supply is here, is what is being saved. So we say supply of loanable funds. Sometimes I call it savings, right? Whatever's been saved. And this is demand for loanable funds. It's really demand for savings, because savings equals investment. If somebody wants to get your savings, they're looking to take that money and invest it in something. All right, now look over here. So what are you going to know? So I want you to write these down, but these are the shifters of each of the curves. For now, that's all you need to know, the shifters of the demand and the shifters of the supply of loanable funds. The first one, the one I need you to know right now, that's why it's number 1, is the shifter of demand is the government. If they borrow to spend money, right, a fiscal policy, increasing spending, then they're going to get that money from somewhere. Where are they going to get it from? The loanable funds market. So demand for borrowing will increase. That creates a deficit. So if the government is borrowing, then demand will shift. If they're borrowing less, then demand will shift the other way. All borrowing for all businesses. If they're going to borrow for some type of business investment, then demand will shift. If a citizen wants to take out a loan for their house or their car, then demand will shift, or vice versa if they want to take out less loans. Foreign demand for domestic currency. This is really not important until the last unit, but if people in England, they want to buy more American cars, then they're going to demand more of our currency, and the demand for loanable funds will shift. Changes in expected profitability will also shift demand. This is the one we use least, so I'm not concerned about it. The supply side. Remember, supply for loanable funds equals savings, supply savings. So all private savings. If more people are putting their money in the bank, then supply of savings increases. If people are taking their money out of the bank, then supply decreases. Money for public savings. So governments also borrow, and sometimes if they don't spend it, where does it go? Well, it gets put into savings. Over here, all foreign investment. So if countries are buying bonds from us, right, they're buying our bonds, they're investing in the country, then we'll have more money. Right now, China buys our bonds, we borrow our money from China. Changes in expected profitability. Don't worry too much about the last one. Okay, so write them down. Yes, memorize them. And now we can move on to what we need to get to for Unit 3. So we have the loanable funds market and we have a real interest rate. So here's my real interest rate. So I'm going to call it interest rate 1. And I have my quantity 1 of loanable funds, right? Remember, supply are your savers, demand are your borrowers. If you remember that, you should be okay. The topic I want to cover is the idea of crowding out. crowding out occurs in this unit when we talk about fiscal policy. So if the government increases spending, GS go up, or taxes go down, and people will spend more because they have more income, then demand for loanable funds could be impacted. So what? Interest rate goes up, interest rates go down. Well, if the government implements a fiscal policy of either spending more or taxing less, then if they spend more, if the government borrows more, then the demand for loanable funds is going to increase. So D1 to DLF2, which is then going to up the interest rate. Interest rate percentage 1, percentage rate 2. And the quantity of loanable funds overall is going to increase, right? Q1 to Q2. All right, again, so what? The argument is, and this is not always proven true, but the argument is the government shouldn't get involved in the market. It's a classical theory argument. Once they get involved in the market, they got to borrow more. And when they borrow more, it ups the real interest rate. And that's bad for who? That's bad for businesses who want to invest in capital. And so they argue every time the government borrows, it increases the real interest rate, which then crowds out foreign domestic investors, businesses. It makes it more expensive for them to borrow money. And so because of that, there's less investment in capital stock. And so you may see an increase of government purchases, and aggregate demand will shift to the right to get us out of a recession, say. But at the same time, you may see aggregate demand go to the right, but then come back to the left because big I investment has gone down. So I tried to write it nice and clearly here. Crowding out, again, may occur. It doesn't have to occur. It may occur when the government borrows to spend money. Demand for loanable funds increases, which increases the real interest rate, making it more expensive for businesses to invest in capital. So this is the key you have to remember. Government purchases will go up, yes, and aggregate demand will go up, but at what cost? Investment, big I, investment, may decrease and aggregate demand won't go up as much as we had hoped. So that's what the argument is for crowding out. You're gonna see it a lot. They might say there is crowding out or there isn't crowding out. What happens in this situation? All right, I hope that was clear.